My wife's dying wish was simple: never set foot on the old estate. I broke that promise and uncovered secrets, betrayals, and a fortune that turned my family into predators. Before we start, let me know in the comments where you're watching my story from, so I can see how far it has reached. My name is Ezekiel Zeke Walker, a 7-year-old black man with a steel gray beard, a church deacon's patience, and a sax player's stubborn lungs. I've lived long enough to bury 2 parents, 1 brother, and, this winter, my wife Ruth. We used to split our time between Atlanta's West End and Charleston's East Side, where Ruth curated orchids at a small historic greenhouse, and I taught night classes on jazz history to anyone willing to listen. On her last morning at MUSC, she clutched my fingers the way a horn grips a note. "Zeke," she whispered, breath thin, eyes sure. "Don't go to the retreat. Promise me." I promised, because love makes fools out of men even older than me. But grief makes a different kind of fool, the kind who opens boxes labeled "Do Not Open." 2 months after the funeral fried chicken cooled and the casserole stopped coming, I sat across from attorney Lionel Booker in his office on Auburn Avenue. The vintage photos of black businesses on his walls felt like they were watching me. Booker slid a small cedar box and a letter across his desk, as if he were handing me a communion cup. "Mr. Walker," he said, voice low and warm, "these would be delivered only after Ms. Ruth's passing." Inside the box lay a heavy, old brass key on a metal tag etched with a magnolia blossom. The envelope carried my name, Ezekiel, in Ruth's looping hand. My thumb traced the ink as if I could bring her back the way I sometimes call a melody back to life. "What's the key for?" I asked. "A property named Magnolia Crest," Booker said. "Up near Lake Marion, just past Santee. Your wife purchased it 4 years ago through a trust. She left instructions that you were not to be told until now." My chest thudded once, slow and hard. Ruth never owned anything besides our condo. "She kept good secrets," Booker said gently. "There's another matter. A developer, Carolina Blue Holdings, is erecting a luxury resort around that lake. In the past 2 years, the area's values have tripled. Magnolia Crest sits on a ridge they'll need for their expansion. They've made several multimillion-dollar offers to the trust." The room tilted like a bad note. Why buy a place just to ban me from it? Why keep it locked up until she was gone? I opened the letter before my courage could run off. "My Zeke, if you're reading this, I had to go sooner than I wanted. Forgive me for the shadows. I swore you away from Magnolia Crest because I needed time to turn a house of hurt into a place of healing. I release you from that promise now. Please visit once before you decide anything. In the study, you'll find my laptop. The password is the day we met followed by hope, the word you taught me to have again. All my love, Ruth." Her handwriting wavered, where I knew her hands had begun to betray her. I pressed the paper to my chest and tasted salt. Even in leaving, Ruth was still arranging the band, still setting the key, still counting me in. "There's a complication," Booker added, his tone shifting. "Her brothers, Marcus, Elijah, and Isaiah Green, are contesting the will. They claim Ruth wasn't of sound mind when she acquired the property. With Magnolia Crest's current value, this could get loud." I slid the brass key into my jacket pocket. "I like my fights face to face," I said. "I'm going today." I drove out of Atlanta before dawn, the interstate unspooling like a long baseline. Pines gathered on the shoulders, then fields, then water flashing through trees. By midday, I turned onto a narrow county road that rose and fell like a hymn. The gate was oak, carved with a magnolia flower and the words Magnolia Crest in iron that had seen storms. I parked on the gravel. The key's weight felt like a small animal asleep in my palm. It turned smooth, one old secret recognizing another. The drive curved through tall pines and low palmettos. I expected a decaying farmhouse. What unfolded was a wide, low, stone and cypress house with a deep porch and slate roof, perched above the lake like a watchman. The landscaping sang in Ruth's voice, native grasses softening the edges, shade trees placed where afternoon heat would forgive your sins. Every surface had been touched by a hand that knew what it wanted to say. Inside, the foyer opened to a great room with a stone fireplace. I took 2 steps and had to reach for the doorframe to keep from dropping to my knees. Paintings of orchids, every wall, every space, watched me in colors I'd only ever seen in Ruth's eyes when she found a rare bloom. Ghost orchids lit like secrets. Lalias, Vandas, Cattleyas, names she taught me on long drives and lazy Sundays, breathed from the canvases. My wife had turned Magnolia Crest into a cathedral of the thing that kept her gentle in a hard world. On a table near tall windows sat a silver laptop, and resting on its lid, a single white lilia and a glass of water, just beginning to open. I smiled despite myself. Ruth never could resist staging. Gravel hissed outside. I walked to the window in time to see a black SUV roll in behind my old Buick. 3 men got out, shoulders squared like a family portrait no one had the energy to smile for. Marcus wore money. Elijah carried a leather folder and the practiced smile of a man who bills by the minute. Isaiah stayed a step back, eyes flicking the way a younger brother's do when he's learned to survive by reading rooms. They moved toward the porch as if the ground had signed a contract with their shoes. I closed the door gently and slid the deadbolt. The wood answered with a firm, old sound. "Mr. Walker." A voice called, firm and familiar. "Marcus, we know you're inside. We'd like to talk about the property." I didn't answer. Ruth's last request hummed in my bones. "Don't go. Not yet. Not until I'm finished." I wasn't about to trade her voice for theirs. The knock came again, harder. "Zeke, it's family," Elijah said. Warmth lacquered over impatience. "Open up so we can keep this civil." I crossed to the table, flipped the laptop open, and typed the password. 05-14-82 Hope. The screen came to life. One folder stared back at me. For Zeke. Inside, hundreds of videos, each titled with a date starting the day after we buried her and marching forward for a year like disciplined soldiers. My finger hovered over the first. I clicked. Ruth filled the frame, alive, cheeks flushed, scarf tied at the nape of her neck the way she did when she meant business. "Hey, my man," she said, voice warm enough to melt butter. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. And you came to Magnolia Crest even after I told you not to. I knew you would. Curiosity is the only mistress I've ever forgiven you for." Outside, a car door slammed. A second engine. I glanced out and saw a county patrol truck turning up the drive. Elijah must have called the law like a drummer calling time when the band won't follow. "I need to tell you something I should have told you sooner," Ruth said. 3 years ago, they found the aneurysm. Daddy's side of the family left me cheekbones and bad plumbing in the brain. They gave me 2 to 5. I decided to live with you instead of die in front of you. I hope you can forgive me for keeping that choice. Anger and love collided in my chest and left a taste like copper. I didn't pause her. When I got the diagnosis, I did 2 things. Her eyes hardened, the way they did when she transplanted a stubborn root. I bought back this house from the man who broke us, Daddy, when he was drowning in debt. He sold it cheap and made me swear not to tell my brothers. And I started turning it into something that would outlast me. They'll come for it now that it's worth something. They'll call it family. Zeke, they mean money. Police tires whispered into the gravel. Marcus's knock returned, emboldened by sirens. I closed the laptop and slid the blue folder Ruth had mentioned, thick with deeds and statements, out of the drawer. The deadbolt turned easily under my hand. A young deputy stood on the porch, badge new, mustache younger. "Afternoon, sir. I'm Deputy Coleman. These gentlemen have a court order requesting an inspection as part of a pending inheritance matter." Elijah lifted the stamped paper as if it were scripture. Marcus folded his arms like punctuation. Isaiah didn't meet my eyes. I let 70 years of living black in the South settle my posture. "Deputy, before anybody steps in this house, would you look at these?" I handed him the blue folder. My wife anticipated this exact conversation. He scanned. His face shifted from duty to caution. He turned to the brothers. "Sirs, these appear in order. Clear title transfers, notarized statements, bank records for the original purchase. This looks civil, not criminal. I can't compel entry today." "That's outrageous," Elijah snapped. "We have standing." "You have a lawyer," I said. Use him somewhere else. Deputy Coleman nodded once, the kind of nod that means a man plans to sleep just fine tonight. Good day, gentlemen. Mr. Walker. They left tight-jawed, defeat wrapped in politeness. I watched their SUV dip back down the drive. Then I shut the door and leaned my back into it for one small, selfish breath. When I turned, the orchids waited in paint and silence, and somewhere behind the house I heard the faint hiss of a misting system and smelled damp leaf and loam. The scent Ruth wore better than perfume. All right, baby, I said to the room and the screen and the air that still remembered her laugh. I'm here. Say what you need to say. And with the folder under my arm and the laptop under my hand, I went to see what she had grown for me to find. I woke before the sun, the way I used to on gig days, when the horn needed a little extra time to warm with me. Magnolia Crest held the kind of quiet that isn't empty, it's listening. Pine needles whispered on the roof. Somewhere down by the water, a heron cleared its throat. I brewed coffee in a kitchen Ruth had laid out like a sermon. Everything in its place. Everything pointing toward the table set for two, even though only one of us needed a chair. I took the laptop to the great room, set it on the table beneath that single white lilia, and pressed play on the second video. Ruth sat on the same porch I'd passed last night, sunrise painting her edges gold. Morning, my man, she said. If you slept at all, I'm proud. I never slept my first night here either. Today, you're going to see the thing I couldn't say out loud, because saying it would have broken me before I finished building it. Her eyes softened, then sharpened. Start in the back, past the live oaks. Follow the stone path until you hear water. Not the lake, the mist. The screen went black. Typical Ruth. She gave you just enough directions to make you find the rest yourself. I stepped outside. The porch boards were new, but creaked as if they'd been taught by older wood. Dew clung to everything the way grief clung to me. Quiet, persistent, unavoidable. The stone path wound between palmettos and Yupon holly. When the ground curved and the air cooled, I heard it. The hush of time sprayers. I turned a corner and met the breath of 100 living things. The conservatory rose out of the earth, like glass was a natural mineral. Arched panes, cypress ribs. Inside, humidity kissed my cheeks and fogged my glasses. And everywhere, orchids. Ruth's kingdom, ordered and gentle. Ghost orchids hanging like spare ideas, vandas in baskets, cattleyas large enough to call you by name, phalaenopsis laid out like a choir. Handwritten tags in Ruth's script marked each plant with its lineage and mood. Ruth never wrote mere notes. She wrote biographies. Good morning, Mr. Zeke. A voice said, warm and sure, the kind of voice that could talk you out of a storm. I turned to see a woman in her early 60s wearing jeans, work boots, and a straw hat with a faded fraternity pin stuck in the band. Brown skin that had known sun, hands that had known work, eyes that had known people. Name's Laverne Jackson, she said, offering me a gloved hand and a smile that started at her eyes. Your wife hired me to keep these divas fed and unbothered. She told me not to disturb you last night, but Lord knows, grief and night don't mix, so I was tempted to bring you a plate anyway. Zeke, I said, shaking her hand. You knew Ruth well as a stubborn woman lets anyone in, she said, chuckling. But we understood each other. Plants and people both want the same things, clean water, honest light, and space enough to grow the way they're built. We walked the aisles while she missed it, pointed, taught. That one came from a little black grower down in Beaufort, she said, tapping a vanda whose purple glowed like a bruise healing. Ruth paid full price, and then slipped the woman extra, told her to keep shaking the money tree until it grew roots. That's my Ruth, I said, and my voice broke on the present tense. Laverne let the mist speak a while. She asked me to tell you something when you got here, she said finally. Said you'd need to hear it from a stranger used to keeping leaves alive. Her words, not mine. Tell my husband I didn't hide this place from him because I didn't trust him. I hid it because I needed somewhere the hurt couldn't find me until I turned it into something that could hold him up when I let go. I stood between a rack of falls and a table of seedlings and let that sentence put its hand on the back of my neck and keep me from falling. She also told me to make sure you saw the other room, Laverne added. lips twisting into a smile like she was holding back good news. Said you'd pretend you didn't need it, then live in it. The other room? Follow me, Mr. Zeke. We crossed the lawn to the east wing of the house. The hall smelled like cedar and lemon oil. Laverne pointed to a door I'd mistaken for a closet. Top drawer of the nightstand, she said. Silver key with a little music note on it. I'll wait. The key was there, exactly where the video had said the first key would be. I returned, slid it into the lock, and pushed. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a simple study. Maybe storage. Instead, myself, reflected back, cleaned and set in order the way Ruth could do a room or a heart. Sun poured through high windows onto a space tiled with cork and wood. Acoustic panels lined the walls in patterns that looked like art and acted like science. Against one wall, a workbench with reed knives, cork grease, old mouthpieces, tiny screwdrivers, and a magnifying lamp. On another, racks holding 3 saxophones, my battered Selmer tenor, polished like a resurrection, a vintage King Alto I hadn't seen in decades, and God help me, a curved soprano that looked like trouble and invitation. Beneath the largest window stood a Hammond A100 with a Leslie cabinet, tubes gleaming like they'd been told they were safe here. On shelves, binders labeled with my old lesson plans, band charts, and, my breath hitched, boxes labeled Zeke 1978, Live at Pascal's, Zeke 1985, Carousel Lounge, Zeke 1991, Savannah. Cassettes, reels, DATs, pieces of me I thought the years had eaten. On the desk sat a reel-to-reel deck, a turntable, good monitors, a new laptop, this one black, with a sticky note. Press me, Pops. Ah, I did. The screen opened to a project called Zeke's Second Set. Folders inside, a standards we love. B, new tunes. I can already hear your face. C, stories you never told. D, Ruth's requests. I laughed out loud and then cried into my own palms. When I looked up, Laverne was in the doorway, not crossing the threshold as if the room had a sanctuary rail. She rescued those? I asked, pointing to the labeled boxes. Drove to 2 storage units, a defunct club in College Park, and your cousin Andre's attic. Laverne said. Paid cash, paid attention, paid off a few old debts folks had with your name on them. She didn't say much, just worked. Said when a good man spends years holding other people's rhythm, the least you can do is build him a room where he can hear his own again. That did me in. I sat at the Hammond and laid both hands on the keys. The dust cover was clean, the organ too. Ruth hadn't just built a studio. She'd carved out time I didn't think I had left. Before I forget, Laverne said, stepping in at last and setting a small tin on the desk. She asked me to keep you honest about your blood sugar. There's ginger tea in the thermos by the window. Diabetes doesn't take days off, grief or no. I nodded, grateful, chastened. Laverne, the brothers, Marcus and them, they came yesterday with a deputy. They've been sniffing around for months, she said. Ruth knew the minute that resort announced phase 1 they'd remember their sister existed. I kept the gate tight, and the sprinklers unpredictable. I chuckled. Sprinklers. Men in expensive shoes don't like surprise rain, she said deadpan. Back in the great room, I queued up the next video. Ruth had changed scarves. Same porch, different light. Laverne met you by now, she said. She's a fortress in a straw hat. Listen to her. Now a note about family. Marcus will play eldest son sympathy. Elijah will make the law sound like whether you can't argue with. Isaiah will keep quiet and count how many times you blink. They'll go through you if they can't go around you. So they'll try Maya. The air left my body. Our daughter, Maya, my headstrong, brilliant, 40-year-old baby who ran a literacy nonprofit in Birmingham and still called me every Sunday to argue about Coltrane's later years. The phone vibrated on the table as if Ruth had willed the timing. Maya's name glowed on the screen. Hey, Daddy, she said when I answered. I just got a call from Uncle Marcus. I didn't know I had an Uncle Marcus. You do, I said. Since yesterday, apparently. They said Mom bought some land and that there's a transition opportunity for the family. Their words, not mine. They called my office. How did they even get my number? Elijah's a lawyer, I said. He collects numbers like trophies. Silence hummed. Is it true, Dad? About the land? It's true, I said, steady as I could. And it's more than land. Your mama built something out here. She also made videos to explain what she couldn't while she was busy staying alive. Maya's breath hitched. Videos. A year's worth. She wants to talk to us both. Come if you can. If you can't, I'll bring the first one to you and let her tell you herself. Marcus said they have a fair plan. They have a plan, I said. Whether it's fair depends on how you spell the word. I'm not asking you to pick sides before you've heard your mother. I'm asking you not to sign anything before you have. Another quiet. I can be there by evening, she said. And Daddy, yeah, baby. I'm mad at her, she whispered, for not telling us. And I miss her so much I can't find my breath. That's a messy combination. Messy still true, I said. Get on the road. I'll make ribs. Laverne will judge me if I burn them. A soft laugh. See you soon. I ended the call and looked at Laverne, who had materialized again like a well-timed chorus. We'll feed the child, she said, and we'll make sure her uncles don't swallow her. Ruth left anything else I should know before the next left hook lands? I asked. Laverne's eyes flicked toward the western edge of the property, where the pines thickened and the ground dipped. There's a tool shed that ain't a tool shed, she said. She told me to show you when you'd seen the studio and listen to your daughter's voice. Looks like you've done both. I set the laptop gently in its place, took the brass key from my pocket, and followed Laverne toward the part of the land where secrets like to wait until you're ready to hold them. The shed stood like an afterthought at the far edge of Magnolia Crest, its boards warped, its tin roof peppered with rust freckles. Compared to the polished main house and the shining conservatory, it looked abandoned, a decoy. Laverne walked ahead, her boots crunching pine straw, her body loose but her eyes sharp, as though she expected company in the shadows. Your wife told me, she said, resting her hand on the crooked handle, that this place would confuse you. Said you'd think it wasn't worth your time. Then she laughed and said, good, because it means he'll be surprised. She tugged the door. Hinges moaned. Inside, rakes, hose, bags of potting soil, an old wheelbarrow with a flat tire. Dust hovered in golden shafts. It looked like the honest mess of a gardener, but Laverne went straight to the back corner, crouched, and pushed aside a stack of paint buckets. Beneath them, a square of wood interrupted the concrete floor. A handle, iron, forged like it belonged to another century. She called it the vault. Laverne said, I call it smart. She bent, lifted the hatch. A puff of cool air rose, earthy and metallic. A ladder descended into shadow. After you, she added, a glint of humor in her eyes. I gripped the sides, careful with my knees, and made my way down. My breath caught when the lights flickered on at the bottom. This wasn't a cellar. It was a command center. Concrete walls, steel shelves, file cabinets lined with labels, a long table with a computer, printer, even a generator humming quietly. Maps covered one wall, pinned and layered, some old, some new, with Ruth's looping handwriting in margins, arrows, dates, notes about water tables and property lines. What is this? I whispered, half to myself. Your wife's war room, Laverne said, stepping down after me. Everything she found out about those brothers of yours and that shiny resort they're building. I approached the wall map. Magnolia Crest's outline was drawn thick and black. Around it, acres upon acres shaded in red, labeled Summit Resorts Phase 1. Further out in green, Phase 2, stretching into land not yet purchased. The golf course sprawled right up against our western edge. Without Crest, Phase 2 collapsed. She knew. I muttered. Better than knew. Laverne corrected. She pulled a folder from one cabinet, slapped it onto the table. She proved it. Inside, reports, valuations, confidential memos. Even a letter from a county planner Ruth must have sweet-talked out of a locked drawer. Every page painted the same picture. Summit's plans hinged on Crest. And the brothers? I asked. Laverne opened another drawer. Out came a thicker file, this one stamped with names, Marcus, Elijah, Isaiah. Inside were bank records, property deeds, and, Lord help me, copies of lawsuits, settled quietly, dismissed quietly, but documented. Insider trading hints, tax questions, investments that collapsed while they walked away whole. My chest burned. Ruth had spent her last years building more than beauty. She'd built a shield, a counterattack, a legacy. She told me, Laverne said, leaning on the table, that when her time came, she couldn't stop death from knocking, but she sure as heaven could stop vultures from circling. She wanted you armed, Mr. Zeke, not with bullets, but with proof. I sat heavily. My heart thudded in my ears. She should have told me sooner. She said the same thing to herself plenty of nights, Laverne admitted. But she knew you. Said you'd spend her last years worrying about lawsuits instead of holding her hand. She wanted your love, not your fight. The fight comes now. I rubbed my temples. Grief pulled me one way. Anger pulled another. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Maya, on the road. Stopping in Augusta for gas. Be there by 7. The relief almost toppled me. She was coming. She hadn't chosen her uncles over me. Not yet. Your daughter's the key, Laverne said, as though she'd read the screen. The brothers will aim for her. Already have. Blood and money. It's their favorite cocktail. I know my child, I said, though doubt scratched at me. Maya was smart, no question. But grief makes fools of the brightest minds. We climbed back into daylight. The shed looked small, harmless again. My knees complained, but my spirit was electric. Ruth had left me more than secrets. She'd left me instructions. By late afternoon, I had ribs slow smoking on the porch. Laverne insisted on coleslaw and cornbread because grief eats better when it chews. The smell drew neighbors of the non-human kind, 2 foxes at the tree line, a hawk circling lazy above the pines. At 7 sharp, Maya's blue Prius rolled through the gate. She stepped out in a sundress and denim jacket, her hair tied up, eyes rimmed with fatigue from driving and crying both. She hugged me, stiff at first, then with a sudden grip that nearly cracked my ribs. Daddy, she whispered. I'm here, I said. And so's she. I pointed to the house. Inside, the ribs laid out, the laptop waiting. We ate first, because hunger talks louder than memory. Then we sat, side by side, and I queued up the next video. Ruth appeared again, porch light dim behind her. Zeke, Maya, if you're watching together, good. If not, fix that. She smiled, a tired smile but true. I owe you both an apology for keeping Magnolia Crest a secret. I was scared of dying in front of you, so I built something instead. Call it cowardice, call it love. Either way, it's yours now. Maya's tears slipped without permission. I need you to know, Ruth continued, that Marcus, Elijah, and Isaiah will dress their greed in family clothes. Don't let them. They've lied before. They'll lie again. The property is clean. Papers, deeds, all of it. Zeke, you'll find the blue folder in the study desk. Maya, there are recordings meant for you, labeled with your name. Listen before you decide who your uncles are. The screen faded. Silence fell. Only the hum of the fridge kept time. Daddy, Maya said finally, her voice small. Why didn't she tell us she was sick? Because she thought love was lighter without shadows, I said, my throat raw. She was wrong, but she meant well. Maya's fists clenched. Uncle Marcus said, don't. I cut in gently but firm. Don't quote him before you've heard her. Promise me that. She hesitated, then nodded. That night, after she fell asleep on the couch clutching a blanket Ruth had crocheted, I stepped outside. The stars sprawled, arrogant in their brightness. My phone buzzed again, unknown number. I answered. Mr. Johnson? A voice asked, smooth as polished glass. Elijah. Yes. My brothers and I will be visiting tomorrow. We'd prefer to discuss matters like gentlemen, rather than involve the courts further. For Maya's sake, if nothing else. For Maya's sake, I echoed. I'll listen. That's all I'll promise. Good. Tomorrow then. The line clicked dead. I pocketed the phone, stared into the dark, and whispered to Ruth. They're coming. But so am I. The pines didn't answer. The lake didn't move. but the air felt charged, as if Magnolia Crest itself had been waiting for this fight. And for the first time since Ruth's passing, I wasn't just mourning. I was ready. I woke before the birds and put on my best church slacks, not to impress, but to remind myself who I was, Ezekiel Johnson, husband, father, horn man, and the rightful steward of Ruth's last composition. By 7, the rib smoke had faded from the porch and coffee had taken its place. Laverne moved through the conservatory like a benediction, mist drifting behind her in silver veils. Maya came down in sneakers and a hoodie. No makeup, eyes puffy but steel showing through. "You ready?" I asked. "I'm tired of being ready," she said. "But yes." We ate eggs and biscuits in the kitchen. Ruth had made a sermon. When the gate camera pinged, I didn't jump. I set my cup down, wiped my hands, and nodded to Laverne. She gave me a look that said I'm right here and disappeared toward the side hall. A black Escalade rolled up Magnolia Crest's drive like it owned time. Another followed, darker tint. Elijah stepped out first in a navy suit that had never met a wrinkle. Marcus came next, older than me by a year, but carrying himself like the world stood at attention. Isaiah hung back, the shadow that always kept score. Behind him, a county cruiser eased in slow. A young deputy climbed out, the kind that still says yes, sir, to any man with gray at his temples. I recognized the play. Arrive big, arrive legal. I opened the door before knuckles could bruise wood. "Gentlemen," I said. "Officer." Elijah put on a smile that didn't bother to include his eyes. "Mr. Johnson," he said smoothly. "Ms. Johnson." He nodded toward Maya. "We appreciate your time. This is Deputy Reed. Purely procedural." Deputy Reed cleared his throat. "Morning, sir." "Ma'am, I have a court order authorizing an exterior inspection related to a pending inheritance dispute." "Inheritance?" Maya murmured. "He's my father. She was my mother." "It's a word they use when they want to pretend blood is a bank ledger," I said gently. I took the blue folder from the console table, the one Ruth had labeled in her careful hand, and passed it to the deputy. "Before anyone steps anywhere, you'll want to review that," I said. "Deed transfers, escrow statements, notarized contracts, and a letter from our county registrar confirming Ruth's sole ownership. Also an affidavit from her physician about capacity at the time of purchase." Elijah's smile pricked. "We are more than familiar with Ms. Ruth's paperwork." "I expect you are," I said, "but Deputy Reed may not be. Let the man do his job without borrowing yours." The deputy opened the folder, scanned, flipped, slowed. His brows made small decisions. The pine wind moved around us like it knew when to hush. "Mr. Johnson," he said finally, "everything here appears in order. This looks like a civil matter best left to the courts. I see no cause to inspect today." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Deputy, sir," the deputy answered, polite but firmer. "I'm withdrawing for now." He tipped his hat to Maya, bless him for that, and left the men to stew in their expensive shade. "Shall we talk inside?" Elijah asked, his voice returning to silk. "We'll talk in the great room," I said, with the windows open and the sun listening. "Come on." They filed in, eyes grazing the wood beams, the polished floors, the photographs of Ruth laughing with her head back. Images I'd chosen for the wall on purpose, like sheet music that tells players what song they've entered. We sat at the long table. I put the laptop on the end like a quiet witness. Laverne slipped in and set down water and coffee, then took a seat by the window, hat on her knee. No one introduced her. She belonged here. The brothers didn't. Elijah set a leather folder in front of him, tapped it lightly. "We're here in the spirit of conciliation," he began. "Ruth acquired Magnolia Crest from our late father at a time when, let's be candid, he was not in the soundest fiscal mind. Prior to that, the property had been understood, informally, yes, but clearly, to be a legacy for the Sterling children. We propose a solution reflecting that history without dragging anyone through months of litigation." He slid a typed document toward me. 1/3 share allocated to your household, 1/3 to Maya as Ruth's daughter, and 1/3 divided among the three of us. "Generous," Isaiah said softly. the first word I'd heard from him. It sounded like a line read at rehearsal. Maya glanced at me, then at the paper. "Daddy." I touched her wrist. "We'll read," I said, and did. 3 pages of legal choreography. Big numbers on one line to make small traps on the next feel polite. A clause releasing the brothers from any claims related to prior family trusts. Another granting them first right of refusal on any future sale. A confidentiality paragraph, fat enough to hide a city. I folded the document and returned it. No, Elijah's smile thinned. "You are declining before a counteroffer?" "I am declining because the premise is crooked," I said. "Ruth bought this land fair, paid in full, and rebuilt what your father let rot. Your informal understanding is a bedtime story you tell each other, so your greed feels like duty. There's nothing to divide here." Marcus leaned in, voice lower now, more like the man Ruth described when she whispered their long history into the night. "Zeke, be reasonable. A resort that size does not negotiate with a retired band teacher and his daughter. We can help you. We know this terrain. You know every terrain where a man can walk off with more than he brought," I said. "I taught 36 years, not because it made me rich, but because it made other people whole. Don't mistake my salary for my sense." Maya stiffened beside me, then sat taller. "Uncle Marcus," she said, and the uncle sounded less like kin and more like a term you use when you're teaching a child how to talk to strangers. "Before we move forward together, I need you to answer something on the record. Did you or did you not use my father's name to move funds through a family account when you were 21? Elijah shot her a quick look, surprised to find a chessboard where he assumed a checkerboard lived. Isaiah's pen stopped mid-doodle. "I did what the family required," Marcus said. "We were saving the property." "You were saving yourselves," I said quietly. "Ruth kept receipts." Elijah's hand hovered over his folder. "Mr. Johnson, threats are unseemly." "Truth isn't a threat," I said. "It's a mirror. If you don't like what you see, you can break the glass, but the face remains." Laverne cleared her throat, not to interrupt, but to punctuate. "Coffee's getting cold," she murmured, and refilled Maya's cup. Elijah tried another lane. "Summit Resorts will box you out. Phase 2 requires access across your western boundary. Without it, they will lobby the county to reroute infrastructure. You will find your costs mounting. Ask your lawyer." "I have," I said, sliding a printed card across the table. "Patrice Holloway. She's been reading what Ruth collected and what your friends at the county accidentally left lying around." Marcus glanced at the name, and something shuddered in his eyes. He knew Patrice's reputation. Southside born, Harvard sharpened, mean as a truth you've avoided too long. "Let's be realistic," Elijah said. "This place is worth a great deal today. It may not be worth as much tomorrow once the market cools or phase 2 adjusts." "Your market arithmetic is charming," I said, "but you've miscounted. This place isn't just an asset. It's leverage. Summit doesn't adjust phase 2. They require it. They've already bought the lowland across Route 6. Their golf course map overlaps my live oaks like a bad haircut. Without Magnolia Crest, their financiers get nervous. Nervous money pays a premium for calm." Isaiah finally looked up. "You can't prove that." "Want to see?" I asked, turning the laptop and clicking open a scanned memo Ruth had titled, "In Case They Doubt." A letterhead, dates, phrases like contingent on and pending acquisition of western parcel. Elijah read too fast, then more slowly. Color raised and then retreated from his cheeks. "This belongs to Summit." "It belongs to the truth," I said. "And since you brought the law into my foyer this morning, let's keep the tone consistent." Maya breathed in, breathed out. "Steady. Here's our counter," she said, beating me to it. "Ruth's daughter after all. You cease any challenge to the deed. You stop contacting me, my staff, and my donors. You sign a statement acknowledging that Magnolia Crest is not, and has never been, subject to any sterling family trust or expectation. In exchange, we agree not to forward certain historical documents to the appropriate authorities." Elijah's fingers tightened. Isaiah's pen snapped, the small click louder than any shout. Marcus stared at Maya as if he was seeing the child he'd hoped would be easy, and finding the woman he should have known was coming. Or, I added, if you prefer courts and headlines, we can do that dance. I have comfortable shoes. Silence spread. Not the kind that weak men mistake for victory. The kind that tells you the next note matters. Marcus exhaled, long and tired. You'll cost us dearly, he said, voice stripped of polish. You want our ruin? I thought of Ruth building this sanctuary while her body betrayed her, of the way she'd kissed my fingers on nights when pain made sleep sting, of her line, I didn't hide this place because I didn't trust you. I hid it so I could make it strong enough to hold you when I let go. I thought of my students, all the kids I told to protect their time and their names because the world would try to rent both cheap. I don't want your ruin, I said. I want peace. Sometimes peace has a price. Elijah gathered his papers with the quiet of a man doing math he didn't like. Isaiah stared at the window as if it might lend him a new script. Marcus stood, older suddenly, skin around his eyes drawn. He looked at Ruth's picture over the mantel and then down at his hands. You were always the better one, he said to the air, to Ruth, to whatever part of himself still had ears. Then he nodded to me. We'll send something to Ms. Holloway before noon tomorrow. We'll read it, I said, and if it's clean, we'll sign. If it isn't, we won't. They left without theatrics. The pines swallowed their cars, and the sound of the engines folded back into birdsong and the far hum of the lake. Maya slid her chair back and leaned into me, her head on my shoulder like she used to do after middle school band concerts when the cymbals had been too loud. I was scared I'd fall for them, she said. I wanted family to be easy. It rarely is, I said, but we can make ours honest. Laverne put her hat on, relief flashing across her face like sunlight between clouds. Patrice will have a field day, she said. In the meantime, Ruth left stew fixings in the freezer. Victory needs vegetables. I laughed, the sound rough but real. Let's cook. Before we moved, I turned the laptop back to Ruth's folder and clicked the next video. Her face filled the screen, tired but fierce. If you got through today, she said, you learned what I learned too late. Truth is a long game. Now go play it. I paused the screen there and let the house take a deep breath with me. Magnolia Crest didn't feel like a battleground anymore. It felt like a home that had watched its first storm and decided it would stand. Sleep was a rumor that night. I sat in the studio Ruth built for me, Hammond humming low like a friend who didn't mind silence. My fingers touched keys, not to play but to remember weight and texture. Outside, the crickets carried on their endless rehearsal. Inside, my chest was too full, of Ruth's face on the laptop screen, of Maya's trembling when she stood up to men twice her age, of the way Marcus had looked at that photograph on the mantel like it burned him. By dawn, I gave up on sleep and walked the grounds. Magnolia Crest glowed wet from dew, every blade of grass sharp enough to cut memory into something new. The conservatory pulsed with mist. Laverne was already inside, whispering to orchids as though they were restless children. You look like a man about to play a solo without a chart, she said when she saw me. That obvious? I asked. You're pacing like the bass line's gone missing. I chuckled despite myself. They'll be back. Marcus isn't the type to fold. No, sir. But folding isn't the only way to lose. Sometimes you bluff too long. She set down the sprayer and came closer. Ruth said you'd struggle with stillness. Said you'd want to fight every measure instead of letting the rests mean something too. That cut, because it was true. Maya woke late, hair wild, eyes stubborn. She joined me on the porch with a cup of coffee too strong for her stomach. I dreamed about her, she said softly. She was pruning orchids, humming something I couldn't place. I asked her why she kept this place from us, and she said, because you wouldn't have let me finish it alive. Then I woke up. She wasn't wrong, I admitted. I'd have dragged her to doctors until she hated me for trying. She wanted peace, not tubes. Maya nodded, then sipped. Uncle Elijah texted me. He said they'd send a new draft agreement today. Wants to meet in the city instead of here. Classic move, I muttered. Take you off home turf. Make you feel small at a polished table. I told him to send it to Patrice Holloway instead, Maya said, a spark in her eyes. Guess where I learned that trick? I smiled. You listened yesterday. I did, but I'm still mad. Stay mad, I told her. It'll keep you sharp. At noon, Patrice arrived. She was tall, brown-skinned, hair cropped close, suit as sharp as a blade. She carried no briefcase, only a slim tablet and a notebook. Mr. Johnson. Ms. Johnson. She shook our hands firmly. I've reviewed the documents your wife collected. Thorough doesn't begin to cover it. She should have been an attorney. She was everything, I said simply. Patrice nodded, understanding without asking more. The Sterling brothers sent a revised proposal this morning. It still reeks. They've softened the numbers, hidden the traps deeper, and added a confidentiality clause, so wide you could drive a truck through it. They're stalling, hoping fatigue will push you into compromise. Then we don't stall, Maya said. Exactly. I suggest we schedule a direct conversation with Summit Resorts. They're the real players here. The brothers are middlemen clinging to a payday. Her words echoed Ruth's videos. My chest tightened. When? I asked. I've already reached out, Patrice said. Their CEO, a Mr. Alston, is curious. I can have him here within 48 hours. Here? Maya asked. Here, Patrice confirmed. On your ground. If they want Magnolia Crest, they come to Magnolia Crest. That's the leverage Ruth secured. That evening, I opened the next of Ruth's videos. She wore her red head wrap, the one she only used when she felt strong. If Alston comes, remember this. He's not your enemy. He's a businessman. He wants the land, yes, but he respects strategy. Show him that you understand the board, not just the pieces. He'll pay more to avoid a war. But don't sell yourself cheap. Crest isn't just acreage. It's the hinge of the whole resort. Make him sing your tune. Maya leaned closer to the screen, whispering. She planned even this. She always played 3 steps ahead, I murmured. The next day was a waiting game. Maya busied herself cataloging the orchids with Laverne, learning each plant like it was a cousin. I sat in the studio, listening to old recordings Ruth had rescued. Me and Smoky clubs, younger, faster, hungry. My own horn lines sounded like letters from a stranger. In the afternoon, the gate buzzed. A delivery truck dropped off a package addressed in Ruth's handwriting. My knees nearly gave out when I opened it. Inside was a box of blank sheet music and a note. Compose, Zeke. Don't just remember. Write what you feel now. The house needs new songs. I touched the pages, felt the tremor in my fingers, and promised her silently. That evening, as the sun turned to lay copper, a silver Mercedes pulled through the gate. Out stepped a tall man in a gray suit with a face weathered more by boardrooms than fields. 2 assistants followed. Patrice greeted him at the drive. Mr. Johnson, Ms. Johnson, he said, shaking our hands with unexpected warmth. I'm Robert Alston. First, let me express condolences. I knew of Ruth's work with community gardens in Atlanta. She was formidable. She still is, I said. We led him into the great room. He noticed the orchids first, then the photographs, then the map pinned above the mantel. His eyes lingered. You already know more than my own board wanted public, he said finally. Impressive. Patrice wasted no time. Summit's Phase 2 depends entirely on this property. Without Crest, your investors face a 40% revenue loss. Mr. Johnson and his daughter are prepared to discuss terms, but not under threat from extended family. That matter will be closed before negotiations continue. Alston nodded. Understood. What do you want? I looked at Maya. She looked at me. Then I spoke. We want security, first of all. No back doors, no loopholes, no room for brothers with grudges. We want protection for the conservatory and the studio, untouchable, preserved. We want fair compensation for access, not pennies for acres. And we want a say in how this land is treated. Ruth built it with her hands. I won't see it paved into a parking lot. Alston studied me like a chess opponent who just advanced an unexpected pawn. Then he smiled, thin but genuine. That's not unreasonable. In fact, it's refreshing. Most landowners roll over. You're playing a longer tune. He rose, buttoned his jacket. I'll prepare a proposal that reflects your conditions. Expect it within the week. In the meantime, watch your flanks. Your brothers-in-law will not surrender gracefully. He left with his assistants, the Mercedes disappearing into dusk. Maya exhaled hard. Daddy, did we just negotiate with a resort CEO in our living room? We did, I said, voice steady but heart thundering. And your mama conducted the whole meeting without being here. That night, I sat at the Hammond, lights dim, laptop open to Ruth's face frozen mid-smile. I whispered to her, "We're holding the line, love. You built the map. We're just walking it." Then I laid my hands on the keys and let the first new song in years find its way into the air of Magnolia Crest. And the house, our house, listened. By morning the lake wore a pewter face, and the pines were gossiping in the wind. Bad weather for liars, and good cover for work. Patrice texted at 7:12. They filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order. Hearing at 2 p.m. today. Don't panic. I didn't panic. I put on my dark suit, kissed my knuckles against Ruth's picture, and packed a blue folder plus the newer stack of scans Patrice had flagged. Maya braided her hair tight, like she did for exams, slid Ruth's old fountain pen into her pocket, and said, "Let's finish a song." We drove into the county seat, with Laverne's prayers still warm in our ears. Courthouse hallways smell the same the world over, wax, paper nerves. The Sterling brothers arrived together, gray ties like they were auditioning for the same part. Their lawyer, different from Elijah today, a litigator with a jaw like an anvil, flicked his eyes over us and decided he'd already won. I held Maya's hand anyway, because even warriors need home base. Judge us. Whitaker wore readers low on her nose and patience even lower. "We'll keep this brief," she said. "Petitioners seek a TRO to prevent respondents from altering, encumbering, or negotiating regarding Magnolia Crest pending resolution of an alleged family claim." She looked at us. "Mr. Johnson, Ms. Johnson, are you represented?" Patrice stood. "We are, Your Honor. Patrice Holloway for respondents. And we object to the premise. There is no alleged family claim with legal teeth. There is only imagined entitlement." The anvil jaw launched into mythology, historic expectations, informal trust, moral equities, the verbal equivalent of smoke machines. Patrice waited him out, then rose with the calm of a surgeon. "Your Honor, Exhibit A, the warranty deed from Mr. Sterling Sr. to Ruth L. Johnson, paid in full, notarized, recorded. Exhibit B, certified bank records proving consideration. Exhibit C, physician affidavit establishing Ruth's decision-making capacity at purchase. Exhibit D, a quitclaim Ruth executed to place the property into her living trust, naming Mr. Johnson and Ms. Johnson as beneficiaries, recorded before her death. Exhibit E, emails in which petitioners explicitly acknowledge they have no recorded interest, followed by demands for side payments when they learned of Summit's expansion. And finally, Exhibit F, an internal memorandum from Summit Resorts indicating Phase 2 is contingent on access across respondents' western boundary, relevant only because it shows motive for the sudden family interest. Judge Whitaker read fast, flipped, then slowed the way all judges do when the narrative tightens on its own. She glanced at the brothers. "Do petitioners dispute the authenticity of these documents?" The litigator cleared his throat. "We dispute the context." "Context doesn't change signatures," she said, and took off her readers. "Petition denied. And I strongly encourage you gentlemen to pursue resolution outside my docket before you find yourselves paying sanctions for frivolous filings." Her gavel tapped once, light final, like the close of a hymn. Maya squeezed my fingers so hard my bones sang. Marcus looked older than the day before. Elijah's mouth was a straight razor. Isaiah just stared at the seal above the bench like it had betrayed him personally. They didn't speak to us as they left. Silence can be a mercy and a warning. Outside, the afternoon had turned bright. The courthouse steps full of reporters hungry for clean lines and clean villains. A microphone swung toward me. "Mr. Johnson, are you blocking a development that would bring jobs?" I could have walked by. Ruth hated cameras. But this was not about me looking good. It was about the story having its spine set straight. I faced them and spoke the way I used to a restless auditorium, clear, measured, with a horn player's breath behind it. Magnolia Crest is my late wife's work, I said. She bought it fair. She rebuilt it with her hands and her money. She gave me and our daughter the tools to guard it. We are not blocking jobs. We are insisting on respect. Respect for the land, for the community's say-so, and for a woman's right to own what she earned without her in-laws rewriting the past. We're open to partnership done right. We said yes to that yesterday. We will always say no to bullying dressed up as business. Maya stepped to the mic as if Ruth had nudged her. And for the record, she added, my uncles do not speak for me. I speak for me. The cameras blinked. The story shifted a degree. Sometimes a degree is all a river needs to find a better sea. Back at Magnolia Crest, I wanted music, but duty came first. Patrice spread documents across the dining table like a general mapping routes. Summit will move quickly now, she said. The TRO denial tells them you're organized. We'll receive their first formal term sheet by Friday. Meanwhile, your brothers will escalate somewhere else, media, donors, or regulators. We shore up all three. She outlined the plan. File for a conservation easement over the conservatory and studio footprint with the State Heritage Council. Once recorded, those zones become development-proof forever. Establish the Ruth L. Johnson Foundation to manage public education programs at the conservatory and studio, legally distinct from our trust, giving us mission cover and allies. Invite community leaders, church folk, and local small business owners for a walking tour. Let them touch the thing they're being told is an obstacle. People defend what they've held. You sure this isn't too much at once? I asked. Mr. Johnson. Patrice said, your wife ran 3 plays ahead while sick. We can run 3 while healthy. We began with the easement. Patrice had pre-drafted language from models she'd used in Savannah Gardens. Laverne and Maya joined me to mark the exact boundaries, 20 feet beyond the glass house, 30 around the studio, a corridor linking them that we called the Ruth Walk. We paced it with a surveyor's wheel, flags fluttering like tiny prayers. I signed, Maya witnessed, and Patrice scanned the wet ink to the registrar before the paper had cooled. Next, the foundation. I'd expected months. Patrice laid out a timeline in days. You already have a mission, she said. Ruth wrote it in her garden notebooks. She was right. We pulled phrases Ruth had scrawled while kneeling in dirt. Teach what grows. Beauty belongs to everybody. No child turned away for lack of bus fare. By dusk, we had articles of incorporation, an EIN application queued, and a draft board list. Me, Maya, Laverne, Pastor Reed from St. Luke's, and Dr. Celia Parker from the Community College Horticulture Program. Maya designed a simple logo from Ruth's sketchbook, a magnolia bud laid over staff lines like a note waiting to be played. Seeing it made my ribs ache sweet. We placed calls for the Saturday walking tour. Laverne did more in 1 hour than a marketing firm could do in a week. Baby, she said into the phone, if you ever sat in my kitchen and ate cornbread, you're coming to see what Ruth left. That was half the county. The RSVP texts started pinging before we set the phone down. The brothers must have felt the ground tilting. That night a blogger posted a piece accusing me of weaponizing grief to block progress. The comments were a mess, bots, bad faith, a few genuine folks wondering where truth sat in the noise. Maya wanted to clap back. I wanted to sleep. Patrice wanted receipts. Do not engage online, she warned. Feed the story you can control. Tomorrow, we issue our own statement and release the 3D site plan showing preserved zones and public access trails. Also, Ruth's videos? We'll cut a 2-minute montage. Not tear-jerking, visionary. You controlling the narrative doesn't mean propaganda. It means clarity. We got to work. Maya clipped clips. Ruth's voice threaded the footage. The land is not a canvas for profit. It's a score everybody should get to hear. My throat caught and then loosened. We ended the video not on sorrow, but on a shot of kids at last summer's church picnic chasing each other under the live oaks, sunlight painting them like a benediction. Laverne found a photo Ruth had taken, and we licensed it to ourselves through the foundation. Patrice wrote the statement, tight, respectful, unafraid. Friday, as promised, Summit's term sheet arrived, cleaner than I expected, richer than I'd allowed myself to hope. Compensation for a 30-year access easement pegged not to acreage but to revenue share. A binding covenant protecting the conservatory, studio, and Ruth Walk. Joint educational programming with their hospitality school. And a community fund seeded with 7 figures, half directed by our foundation. It wasn't perfect, but it was a chord in the right key. We sat with it at the kitchen table. Maya ran her finger down each paragraph. She did this, she whispered. Mama set the metronome. We just kept time. We still have to negotiate the tempo, I said, but my chest had light in it. Saturday dawned bright enough to make even the dusty tools look hopeful. Folks came in waves, church hats, barber smocks, seed-stained hands, a trumpet case or two. Pastor Reed prayed short and real. Dr. Parker pointed out the microclimates Ruth had carved with rock and shade. Kids pressed noses to glass where rare orchids held court like queens. I stood on the front steps when it was time to talk. I told the story plain. Not the litigated version, not the blogger's fear, not Summit's spreadsheet. Ruth's story, and the choice in front of us. We're not saying no, I said. We're saying yes on our terms, with you standing beside us so no one forgets who lives here. When I finished, an old student, Dion, who'd once been a trumpet note, so blue half the cafetorium shouted, raised his hand. Mr. J, he said, what you need from us? Your ears, your feet, your names. I said, come, see. Correct lies when they show up at Thanksgiving. Donate if you can. Volunteer if you can't. And keep me honest. If I drift, pull me back. Laverne started singing Blessed Assurance, and the crowd caught it without being asked. It wasn't a protest. It was a promise. After everybody left and the crickets reclaimed the yard, I took Ruth's box of blank staff paper to the studio. The Hammond waited like a patient horse. I wrote the title first, Ruth Walk. Then the first bar, then the second. It wasn't grief music anymore. It was a procession, neighbors, children, donors, even a resort CO learning to whisper on sacred ground. Halfway through, Maya knocked and came in with lemonade and a question. Daddy, she said, when this is all over and the papers are signed, what do we do then? We keep tending, I said. Contracts are fences. Gardens are futures. We'll need both. She sat on the bench with me. I played her the melody. She hummed the harmony I hadn't found yet. We wrote it down together, our handwriting sharing the same line, our breathing lining up without effort. Out by the magnolias, a night breeze lifted and fell, like the house was breathing too. Magnolia Crest had been a secret. Now it was a vow, and we were keeping it. By the time Sunday rolled around, the brothers had gone quiet. Too quiet. That kind of silence is never surrender. It's just regrouping. Patrice warned me not to mistake a pause for peace. They're lawyers, she said, sipping her black coffee like it was armor. They're predators dressed in press suits. If you've embarrassed them in court and in public, trust me, they'll hunt for a softer flank. She was right. The flank was Maya. Late that night, she came into the living room where I was working on the new foundation bylaws. She looked uneasy, one hand tucked in her sweatshirt pocket. Daddy, they reached out again, she said. My stomach tightened. Who? I asked, though I already knew. Uncle Marcus called me. Twice. Then Isaiah texted. Said he wanted to meet. Just him. No lawyers, no Elijah. He sounded different. Like he wanted to apologize. I put down my pen. And you? I didn't answer. But part of me wants to hear him out. I don't know why. I sighed and rubbed the bridge of my nose. My daughter had her mother's empathy, the curse and the blessing both. Maya, you saw what happened in court. You heard what Patrice laid out. Do you think a man facing sanctions is suddenly here to confess his sins over sweet tea? She hesitated. I know, but he's still family. And if Mama's whole legacy is about forgiveness and community, maybe listening to him is part of it. I had no quick reply. She was right in one way. Ruth believed in grace, but grace without discernment is just an open gate to wolves. Tell you what, I finally said. We won't shut the door on him. But if he wants to talk, he talks on our porch, in daylight, with me sitting right there. No shadows. No secrets. She nodded, relief and disappointment tangled together. Okay. Porch, daylight, both of us. The next morning, Isaiah showed up, not in the sleek black SUV, not even in a suit. He came alone, in a weathered sedan that had seen too many miles, wearing a jacket one size too big. His hair was grayer than I remembered, and his shoulders slumped like he was tired of holding himself upright. He stopped at the edge of the porch, hands visible, no folders, no papers. Brother-in-law, he said quietly. Niece, we didn't invite him in. He sat on the top step, Maya beside me on the bench swing. The morning air smelled of pine and last night's rain. I came to say I'm sorry, Isaiah began. Not with lawyers, not with Marcus putting words in my mouth. Just me. I was wrong to go along with all of it. His voice trembled at the edges. He looked at Maya, then me. She was better than all of us. Always was. She deserved better from me, from Marcus, from Elijah. And you, Mr. Johnson, you deserve better than this mess. I kept my face still, the way I used to when students try to charm their way out of late assignments. Why now, Isaiah? You had plenty of chances before the judge, before the cameras. He looked down at his hands. Because Marcus is planning something worse. Something even Elijah can't control. He wants to leak false claims. Say Ruth was coerced into signing, that she wasn't in her right mind when she bought Magnolia Crest. He has witnesses lined up, paid witnesses. If that doesn't work, he'll stir the pot with Summit directly, offer them a side deal for our blessing in exchange for money under the table. Maya gasped. I stayed quiet, watching his face, searching for cracks. His shame looked real. His fear looked realer. Why tell us? I asked. Because I'm done, he said simply. I can't fight my own blood in public anymore. I can't keep carrying lies for Marcus. I've lost enough in life already. If he wants to go down swinging, let him. But I won't be part of it. For a long moment, the porch was silent except for the creak of the swing. Finally, I asked, What do you want from us, Isaiah? He shook his head. Nothing. Just don't mistake me for them. That's all. Then he stood, walked back to his battered car, and drove off down the gravel road. Maya looked at me, eyes wide. Do you believe him? Half, I admitted. Half of him wants redemption. The other half is scared of Marcus. But fear can make a man tell the truth, even if only to save his own skin. That afternoon, we told Patrice. She tapped her pen against her notebook, thinking. It tracks, she said. We've heard whispers about Summit lobbyists sniffing around for shortcuts. If Marcus is desperate enough to throw mud at Ruth's memory, we need to be ready to bury it before it sprouts. How? I asked. With Ruth herself, Patrice said. Her writings, her videos, her community. You can't erase a woman's legacy when it's living in dozens of voices. We gather affidavits. We record testimonies. We bring every church member who ever saw Ruth out here with a shovel or a prayer. The judge already trusts the paper trail. Now we add the people trail. Maya nodded fiercely. Mama's voice won't be drowned out by lies. So we got to work. Over the next 3 days, we filmed interviews in the conservatory and on the porch. Elders, neighbors, former students, all telling stories of Ruth's clarity, her passion, her stubbornness, her exacting mind. That woman knew the Latin name of every flower she touched. One laughed. She wasn't confused about nothing. Meanwhile, Patrice drafted a preemptive motion, respondents' anticipatory rebuttal of alleged incapacity claims. A mouthful, but strong medicine. By Friday, the file was thick enough to anchor a boat. If Marcus tries to smear her name, Patrice said, patting the folder, he'll regret it. But Marcus didn't wait for court. He went to the press. Saturday morning, a headline splashed across a regional news site. Was Magnolia Crest widow exploited? Family questions legitimacy of property transfer. The article quoted sources close to the Sterling family, claiming Ruth had been mentally compromised in her last years. It suggested undue influence, coercion, even hinted at forged documents. No hard evidence, Just insinuation. But the poison was out. Maya threw the paper down on the kitchen table. They're dragging Mama's name through the mud. I can't stand it. I felt fire rise in my chest, but I steadied my breath. Then we don't fight with fire. We fight with water. Truth flows. We'll drown the lie. We called an emergency gathering at St. Luke's that afternoon. Patrice arranged for cameras, this time ours. The sanctuary filled with neighbors, friends, former colleagues, students. Pastor Reed opened with a prayer, then handed me the mic. I stood under the stained glass window Ruth had loved, my voice steady even as my hands trembled. They say my wife was confused. I began. That she didn't know what she was signing. That she couldn't tell her left hand from her right. I let the silence hang. But every person in this room knows different. Ruth Johnson was the sharpest mind, the clearest voice, the most stubborn woman I ever met. She chose this land. She built this house. She chose to pass it to me and our daughter. Nobody coerced her. Nobody could have. The room erupted in amends. Then we rolled the video montage Patrice had prepared. Ruth herself filled the screen, healthy, laughing, instructing children in the garden, speaking about the vision she had for Magnolia Crest. Her words rang like bells. This land is for learning, for beauty, for community. And when I am gone, let my family guard it. By the end, half the room was on its feet. Reporters scribbled furiously. Marcus's smear had just been answered not by lawyers, but by the living truth of a community's memory. That night, after everyone left, I sat on the porch alone. The crickets sang their endless hymn. I whispered into the dark. Ruth, they tried to erase you, but they don't know. You planted yourself in too many hearts. Behind me, the conservatory lights glowed like a lantern. Maya stepped out, wrapped a blanket over my shoulders, and said, Daddy, we're winning. But it's not over, is it? I shook my head. No, Marcus won't stop until he's broken or broke. And Elijah's still out there, sharpening his tongue. The hardest notes are still ahead. She sat beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. Then let's keep playing. The night air carried the scent of magnolias. Somewhere deep inside, I felt Ruth's spirit nodding. The battle was turning, but the war for Magnolia Crest was far from finished. By Monday morning, Elijah made his move. Unlike Marcus, he wasn't a man for sloppy headlines. He was precise, surgical, and cruel in his polish. Patrice handed me a freshly printed stack of papers. He filed a petition for declaratory judgment, she said, tapping the cover page, asking the court to recognize that Ruth's purchase of Magnolia Crest was made under questionable circumstances and that ownership should revert to the Sterling family for equitable distribution. I scanned the legal jargon. It was a masterpiece of insinuation, phrased not to prove anything, just to raise questions. Equitable distribution, I muttered. Fancy way of saying theft. Patrice nodded grimly. Elijah is playing a longer game. He knows the last petition failed. This isn't about winning today. It's about dragging this out, bleeding you dry with time and money. Maya slammed her fist against the table. Then we fight harder. We don't give them 1 inch. I admired her fire, but I felt the weight of age pressing on me. At 70, battles take something out of you that doesn't grow back as quickly. Still, I looked at her and said, We'll fight, baby girl. We'll fight every inch. That afternoon, Summit Resorts revealed their hand too. A courier delivered a glossy envelope, thick with charts and figures. Their revised partnership proposal looked generous at first glance. Millions in upfront payment, scholarships for local students, even promises of jobs in the community. But buried on page 17 was the trap. They wanted perpetual easement rights, forever access to the western corridor of Magnolia Crest, with authority to modify landscape as necessary for resort expansion. Patrice circled it in red ink. This clause is the entire ballgame, she said. Sign it, and you give them the power to bulldoze your protections 20 years from now. I pushed the envelope back across the table. Then it's no deal. Ruth didn't fight for forever just to sell it for pocket change dressed up pretty. The next move wasn't ours. That evening, Maya received an invitation. Not a phone call, but a letter slipped under the gate. Handwritten, elegant script. It was from Elijah. Dear Maya, I know emotions run high in moments like these. I also know your father will never give you the full picture. Please, grant me the courtesy of dinner at the Lakeside Club tomorrow evening. Just you and me. No lawyers. No cameras. I promise only the truth. Maya showed it to me with shaking hands. He thinks he can get me alone, she said bitterly. I read it twice. He doesn't want truth, I said. He wants leverage. He knows Marcus already lost you. Now he's hoping his silver tongue can twist you. She looked at me with defiance. Then maybe I should go. My heart lurched. Absolutely not. Daddy, listen. If I don't hear them out, they'll just claim you're manipulating me. If I go, I can at least record what he says. Use it against him later. Her logic was sharp, but the thought of her across a table from Elijah chilled me. I had seen the way he dissected people with words. She was smart, but she was young. Not alone, I said finally. If you go, I'll be there. Maybe not at the table, but close enough to step in if needed. She gave a reluctant nod. The Lakeside Club looked like money pressed into bricks, mahogany walls, white linen, chandeliers dripping crystals. Elijah was already seated at a corner table, sipping red wine like it was communion. He rose when Maya approached, smiling warmly, extending both hands as though she were his long-lost daughter. I stayed at the bar, far enough to seem uninvolved, but close enough to hear. Maya, Elijah said smoothly, you are the very image of your mother. Don't, she snapped. Don't say her name like you knew her. He chuckled softly, as though her anger amused him. Fair enough. Let me instead speak plainly. You are bright, ambitious, capable, but you're young, and youth can be blinded by loyalty. Your father is a good man, but he is stubborn. He sees this battle as legacy. You, however, you must see it as opportunity. Maya sat stiff, arms folded. What kind of opportunity? Elijah leaned closer. A seat at the table. With us. Marcus may be reckless, but I am not. If you join us, we can negotiate with Summit on our terms. You'd walk away a millionaire before 30. Think of the life you could build, the doors you could open. Her jaw tightened. So you want me to betray my father? No, he said smoothly. I want you to save him from himself. He clings to Ruth's dream, but dreams can't pay tuition, buy houses, fund futures. Legacy is fine, but legacy without wealth is just a burden. Maya's eyes flicked to me at the bar. I gave her the smallest nod, steady, strong. She turned back to Elijah. You're wrong, she said firmly. My mother's dream is not a burden. It's the reason I'm still standing. You think I'll sell her out for money? You don't know me at all. For the first time, Elijah's smile faltered. He exhaled through his nose, a faint hiss. Then you've chosen sides. And when this ends, remember that I gave you a chance to walk away rich. Maya rose, dropped her napkin on the table, and said, My chance is already here. It's called Magnolia Crest. Good night, Uncle Elijah. We walked out together, heads high. Back home, we debriefed with Patrice. She listened carefully, nodding as Maya recounted every word. Then she smiled. He overplayed. This is gold. If we need to, we can use his statements to show the court he tried to induce undue influence over you. That flips their whole narrative. But the victory felt small, because beneath Elijah's charm was a warning. He wasn't done. He was just beginning. Sure enough, the very next day, Summit Resorts made their boldest play yet. A letter from their CEO, delivered in person by a company car. Mr. Johnson, Ms. Johnson, while we respect your position, Summit Resorts cannot indefinitely delay Phase 2 of our project. If no agreement is reached within 30 days, we will be forced to pursue eminent domain through the county board. This will be costly for all parties, but we are prepared to proceed. Maya read it aloud, her voice shaking with fury. They're threatening to steal it outright. Patrice folded the letter calmly. Eminent domain is their nuclear option. They're bluffing mostly, but it means the brothers have convinced them you're weak enough to break. We have to show them you're stronger than ever. How? I asked. Public pressure. Political allies. If Summit tries to push eminent domain, it has to go through the county board. That's 5 votes. We secure 3, and Summit's bluff dies in daylight. Maya leaned forward. Then let's go get 3. That week turned into a campaign. We met with board members one by one, walking them through the conservatory, showing them the art studio, letting them see Ruth's legacy firsthand. Pastor Reed rallied church congregations. Laverne brought small business owners who stood to lose if the resort swallowed the county whole. By Friday, 2 board members were firmly with us. A third was leaning our way. The other 2, squarely in Summit's pocket. Patrice smiled thinly. 2-2 with 1 swing vote. That's a tie waiting to be broken. We just need to hold the line until the public hearing. I looked out over the land that night, the conservatory lights glowing, the studio filled with sketches and half-finished canvases. Magnolia Crest was holding for now, but I could feel the storm building. Marcus with his rage, Elijah with his cunning, Summit with its millions. They weren't retreating. They were circling. I whispered to the night air, "Ruth, give me your strength, because the next round won't be just about property. It'll be about survival." And the crickets answered, steady as a metronome, like they'd been keeping time with me all along. The day of the county board hearing dawned sharp and heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Magnolia Crest's kitchen smelled of chicory coffee and nervous energy. Maya sat across from me at the table, tapping her pen against a yellow notepad. "We've got 3 minutes each to speak," she said, eyes scanning the agenda Patrice had given us. "That's not much time to defend Mama's life's work." "It doesn't take long to tell the truth," I said, though I knew it wasn't that simple. Elijah could weave poison in less than 30 seconds. Marcus could thunder until the rafters shook. Summit would bring graphs and charts that glowed like gospel on a projector screen. We had truth, yes, but truth doesn't always shout the loudest. Patrice walked in with her usual calm armor, a navy blazer, a stack of folders, and a thermos of green tea. "Remember," she said, sliding copies of our statements across the table, "we're not here to convince Marcus or Elijah. We're here to win 3 votes. Keep your eyes on the board members. Forget the cameras. Forget the audience. Just speak to those 5 people." I nodded. 3 notes and a chord. That's all we need. The hearing room was packed by 10 a.m. reporters, developers, retirees, church folks in Sunday best. The air buzzed with whispers and the faint smell of fried chicken somebody had smuggled in for lunch. At the front sat the 5 board members behind a long oak dais. At their center, Chairwoman Whitfield, a stern woman with steel gray hair and an expression carved from patience and politics. Summit's delegation entered first, polished suits, glossy binders, a projector wheeled in on a cart. Marcus and Elijah came in next, Isaiah trailing behind like a ghost. Elijah gave a polite nod toward Maya. Marcus didn't even look at us. Patrice touched my elbow. "Eyes forward," she murmured. The hearing began with the county clerk droning through the agenda. Then Summit's lead negotiator, a tall man named Richard Cole, stepped up to the microphone. His voice was smooth as marble. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," he began, "Summit Resorts has brought prosperity wherever it has built. Jobs, revenue, tourism dollars. Our Phase 2 expansion will bring over 200 permanent positions to this county and generate millions in tax revenue. We ask for your support to secure the necessary access through Magnolia Crest to make this vision possible. In exchange, Summit pledges significant community benefits, scholarships, infrastructure improvements, and a revitalized local economy." He clicked the projector remote, and graphs bloomed across the screen. Rising lines of profit, smiling families at vacation cabins, renderings of golf courses greener than Eden. The crowd murmured in approval. Then Elijah approached the microphone, his suit crisp, his tone solemn. "Board members, I stand before you not just as an attorney, but as a brother. Magnolia Crest has been in the Sterling family for generations. My late brother David, God rest his soul, reacquired it, but not transparently. There are questions, unresolved matters. We only ask that this board delay any binding action until those questions are answered in court. Do not let the county be drawn into a quagmire of private disputes." It was cunning, positioning us as the ones dragging the county into mess, painting himself as the voice of caution. He stepped back with a modest bow of the head. Chairwoman Whitfield nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. Now, Mr. Johnson, you have the floor." I rose slowly, the way I used to when conducting a concert. Every movement deliberate. My knees ached, but my voice came out steady. "Good morning. My name is Samuel Johnson. Magnolia Crest is my home. More importantly, it was the dream of my late wife, Ruth Johnson. She bought it legally. She restored it with her hands. She taught children in its gardens and opened its doors to neighbors. This is not just acreage. It is a living classroom, a sanctuary, a community promise." I glanced at the board members, holding each gaze. Summit talks about jobs. That matters. But prosperity cannot be built on erasing history or silencing a woman's voice after death. Ruth left this land in trust to me and my daughter Maya. She was sharp until the day she died. Sharp enough to outthink anyone who tries to twist her memory now. She wanted this land preserved, not parceled to the highest bidder. And we intend to honor her. The room was quiet, just the faint hum of the projector. Then Maya stood beside me, taking the second microphone. "My mama raised me here," she said, her voice strong but trembling at the edges. "She showed me how to plant, how to listen, how to fight for what's right. I'm 22 years old, and I could take the easy money and walk away. But I won't, because my mama didn't teach me to sell out the soil she loved. She taught me to protect it. If you want to see what she built, come walk the Ruth Walk. See the orchids. See the art studio where she painted with her students. You'll understand then that this place is worth more than any resort." The crowd erupted in applause before Chairwoman Whitfield banged her gavel for order. The board recessed for deliberation at noon. The room broke into clusters of chatter. Marcus stalked to the back, whispering fiercely with Elijah. Summit's people huddled around their charts. I stepped outside into the sunlight, breathing an air that smelled of cut grass and exhaust. Isaiah approached quietly, hands in his pockets. "You spoke well," he said. I looked at him warily. "And what did you tell them?" "Nothing," he replied. "I didn't testify. Couldn't bring myself to echo Elijah's lies." He sighed, shoulders sagging. "You should know, Marcus is losing control. He's desperate. That makes him dangerous." I believed him. Desperation breeds recklessness, and Marcus had plenty of both. When the board reconvened, tension crackled like static. Chairwoman Whitfield adjusted her glasses and spoke. "This board has heard arguments from all sides. We recognize the economic promise of the Summit project. We also recognize the legal disputes surrounding Magnolia Crest. After deliberation, this board votes as follows. Member Torres, approve. Member Jenkins, approve. Member Bradley, deny. Member Fields, deny. As chair, the deciding vote rests with me." The room went still. My pulse pounded in my ears. Whitfield paused, letting the weight hang heavy. "I vote to deny Summit's request for county support of eminent domain proceedings until the courts resolve ownership and until Summit presents a plan with stronger guarantees for environmental and cultural preservation. This project cannot proceed." The gavel struck. Motion denied. For a moment, silence reigned. Then the room exploded. Cheers from our side, angry murmurs from theirs. Reporters rushed forward. Summit's delegation stormed out, faces red with fury. Maya grabbed my arm, tears in her eyes. "Daddy, we did it. We held the line." I hugged her tight. "For now," I whispered. "But victories come with shadows." That evening, as we returned to Magnolia Crest, we found the gate ajar. Inside, one of the conservatory's side windows was smashed. Orchids lay trampled, their delicate petals scattered like wounded soldiers. Maya gasped, dropping to her knees beside a crushed pot. "Mama's flowers." My chest burned with rage. It wasn't Summit style. This was personal. Marcus's desperation had spilled into vandalism. I stood in the wreckage, fists clenched, and swore into the broken glass. "They want war? Then they'll have it. But on Ruth's terms, not theirs." Because if they thought smashing orchids would break us, they'd forgotten something vital. Orchids grow back. And so do we. The morning after the vandalism, Magnolia Crest felt like a battlefield after the first skirmish, quiet, but full of scars. Shards of glass glittered in the conservatory floor like frozen tears. Half a dozen orchids were destroyed beyond saving. Maya wept as she gently lifted broken stems, whispering as if apologizing to her mother. I stood beside her, my jaw tight. This wasn't random, I said. This was a message. Patrice arrived within the hour, legal pad in hand. She inspected the damage with a grim expression. We'll file a police report, she said. Even if they never catch who did it, it documents a pattern. Harassment plus vandalism equals intimidation. Courts don't like intimidation. But Maya wasn't satisfied with paperwork. Mama's orchids are dead, Daddy, she said, her voice raw. Filing a report won't bring them back. No, I agreed, but rebuilding will. And that's what we're going to do. The sheriff's deputy, who came out, looked uncomfortable, like he'd walked into a family quarrel bigger than his badge. He took photos, scribbled notes, promised to follow up. But when he left, I saw doubt in his eyes. He didn't believe justice would reach this far. Later that day, Laverne brought over trays of food and a Bible already open to Psalms. Don't let them break your spirit, baby, she told Maya, stroking her hair. Every flower that dies makes room for another bloom. Maya tried to smile, but I could see the hurt behind her eyes. She had inherited Ruth's stubbornness, but grief has a way of slipping through armor. That night, I sat in the studio, staring at the blank canvas Ruth had left for me. My hands trembled over the paintbrush. I wanted to capture the rage, the violation, but all I could see was Ruth's smile the first time she showed me an orchid blooming under her care. Rage couldn't capture that. Only resilience could. 2 days later, Elijah made his next move. Patrice called with the news. They filed a motion for expedited discovery, she said. They want access to Ruth's medical records, therapy notes, anything they can twist into proof of incapacity. I clenched the phone tighter. She was sharp until the day she died. They won't find anything. They don't need truth, Patrice said softly. They need shadows. Enough shadows to cast doubt. Maya overheard and stormed into the room. They're trying to dig through Mama's private life? Her journals? Her doctor visits? That's disgusting. Yes, Patrice agreed, which is why we fight it. We'll oppose the motion, argue privacy rights. And if the judge forces disclosure, we'll be ready with testimony from her doctors and friends. We don't just defend Ruth's memory, we defend her dignity. For the first time, I saw fear in Maya's eyes. Not fear of losing property, but fear of losing her mother all over again in court filings and cross-examinations. I pulled her close. They can try to smear her, but they can't erase who she was. We'll make sure of that. That same week, Summit Resorts played their card. A full page had appeared in the local paper showing smiling families, job statistics, and the tagline, "A brighter future for the county. Don't let one family stand in the way." The implication was clear. We were the obstacle. We were the selfish holdouts. At church that Sunday, whispers followed us down the pews. Some folks nodded encouragement, but others looked uneasy, calculating what jobs might mean for their families. The battle lines were no longer just legal. They were seeping into the community's conscience. Pastor Reed addressed it head-on during his sermon. The good book says a house built on sand cannot stand. If we trade integrity for money, we build on sand. And if we let greed decide the fate of sacred ground, we all lose, no matter how many jobs we think we gain. His words steadied me, but I knew sermons wouldn't reach everyone. Summit had money, and money shouts louder than scripture in some ears. That evening, as Maya and I walked the property, she said, "Daddy, maybe we need to show people more than words. We need to open Magnolia Crest. Let them see Mama's dream for themselves." Her idea was simple but powerful. A public open house. Not just for allies, but for everyone. Neighbors, skeptics, even reporters. Transparency as our weapon. Patrice agreed. If you invite the community in, you change the narrative. You're not the family hoarding land. You're the family sharing a legacy. So we planned it. Flyers went out through churches, barbershops, the community college. We called it the Ruth Johnson Day of Learning. On the morning of the event, Magnolia Crest hummed with life. Volunteers set up tents for food. Local musicians tuned their instruments. Children ran across the lawn with wide eyes. The conservatory door stood open, orchids blooming in defiance of the broken glass we'd repaired. I greeted guests at the gate, shaking hands, answering questions. Maya led groups along the roof walk, pointing out rare flowers, telling stories of her mother's lessons. Laverne ladled gumbo, while Pastor Reed's choir sang under the magnolias. The crowd was larger than I dared to hope. Hundreds, not dozens. Neighbors who'd been skeptical walked the grounds and left with softer faces. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras captured laughter and learning. And then, near midday, I saw Marcus at the edge of the crowd. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't clapping. He stood with arms crossed, eyes narrowed, watching like a general scouting enemy defenses. Our eyes met. He mouthed one word across the distance, war. I held his gaze, then turned back to the guests, my voice louder, steadier. This is Ruth Johnson's legacy. This is what we're fighting for. And we won't let anyone tear it down. The crowd erupted in cheers, drowning out Marcus's glare. That night, after the last guests left and the lanterns flickered out, Maya sat beside me on the porch. "Daddy," she whispered, "do you think we can really win this?" I looked at her, at the glow of the conservatory in the distance, at the canvas still waiting in the studio. "We already are," I said. "Every time we tell Ruth's story, every time we open these doors, every time we plant another flower, we're winning. The question isn't if we'll survive this war. It's how much stronger we'll be when it's done." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Then let's keep fighting." The night air smelled of magnolia blossoms, and for the first time in weeks, I felt peace settle over me. Not because the war was over, but because Ruth's spirit was with us, steady as the roots under our feet. The week after the open house felt like a breath we hadn't had in months. Magnolia Crest was alive with energy, calls from teachers asking about field trips, neighbors offering to volunteer, even a few donors writing checks for the new foundation. For a moment, it seemed like Ruth's dream had not only survived, but had started to bloom bigger than ever. But peace, I've learned, is always a fragile guest. On Thursday morning, I woke to find Maya pacing the porch, her phone in hand, eyes wide with fear. "Daddy," she said, "look." She handed me the screen. A video was playing, grainy, recorded at some bar. It showed me, years ago, drunker than I ever want to remember, stumbling out the door after a gig, shouting curses at some unseen heckler. Someone had dug it up and spliced it together with commentary. This is the man entrusted with Magnolia Crest? A drunk, a failure, unfit to manage community land. The watermark in the corner was from a local news blog I knew Marcus had funded before. I closed my eyes, shame cutting deep. That night had been decades ago, before I sobered up, before Ruth saved me with her patience and her fire. But the world doesn't care about context. The world only cares about the spectacle. Maya's voice trembled. "They're coming after you now." I steadied myself. "Let them. I've already faced that demon once. It won't scare me twice." By noon, the video was spreading online. Reporters called, asking for comment. Patrice drafted a statement. "Mr. Johnson has been sober for over 30 years. His past struggles are well documented and only underscore his strength and resilience. Attempts to smear him dishonor the memory of Ruth Johnson and insult the community she served." It was clean, strong, but my pride still stung. I spent the afternoon in the studio, hands on the Hammond, trying to play the shame out of my chest. Ruth used to tell me, "Zeke, every wrong note can turn into a blue note if you bend it right." I prayed she was right. That evening, as the sun bled orange over the lake, a car pulled up the drive. To my surprise, it was Isaiah. He stepped out slowly, holding a battered briefcase. His eyes darted around, nervous, like a man checking for shadows. "May I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded, but only because Maya's here to watch. He followed us into the great room, setting the briefcase gently on the table. "I'm not my brothers," he said. "I've made mistakes, yes, but I'm not like them. I brought something you'll need." He opened the case. Inside were folders, neatly labeled. bank statements, emails, contracts. He slid one across to Patrice, who had joined us via speakerphone. "These are Marcus's records," Isaiah said. "Proof he's been funneling money from Summit under the table. Bribes, payoffs, hush funds. He wanted me to sign some of them years ago, but I refused. I kept copies instead. I thought maybe one day I'd need them." Maya gasped. "You're giving this to us?" Isaiah nodded, his face heavy with regret. "Marcus has gone too far. He smashed your conservatory. He's digging up old dirt on your father. Next, he'll burn the whole county if it means winning. But this is his weakness. Use it." I studied him carefully. "Why now?" He swallowed hard. "Because I'm tired of being a coward. And because Ruth once told me I could be better. She told me that 30 years ago, and I ignored her. I don't want to ignore her anymore." His voice cracked. For the first time, I believed him. That night, Patrice combed through the documents via video call. Her eyes gleamed with something close to triumph. "This is dynamite," she said. "If it's authentic, and I believe it is, we can file a motion accusing Marcus of fraud and collusion. More importantly, we can leak it discreetly to Summit's board. They'll drop him like a stone. No corporation wants dirty laundry tied to their expansion project." Maya leaned forward. "So this could end it." Patrice's smile was cautious. "It could, but cornered animals lash out. Marcus won't go quietly. If we use this, be ready for his retaliation." I glanced at the conservatory window we had repaired, the faint scars still visible. "We're already ready." 2 nights later, retaliation came. Not through lawyers, not through headlines, through fire. At 3 in the morning, the smell of smoke yanked me awake. Maya burst into my room shouting, "Daddy, the studio!" I ran barefoot into the night. Flames licked the side of the art studio, hungry and fast. The wooden beams groaned as sparks showered into the dark. "Call 911. I roared, grabbing the garden hose, spraying futile arcs of water against the inferno. The heat seared my skin, smoke choking my lungs. Neighbors came running, buckets in hand, joining the desperate fight. Sirens wailed in the distance, but by the time the fire trucks arrived, half the studio was gone. Canvases turned to ash, sketches curling into nothing. Maya clutched me, sobbing. Mama's paintings, her lessons, they're gone. I held her tight, my own eyes burning. "Not all," I said hoarsely. "She left us more than paper. She left us her voice, her vision. That can't burn." But as I stared at the smoldering ruin, rage coursed through me. This wasn't random. This was Marcus's hand again, cowardly, cruel, trying to scorch Ruth's memory out of existence. I swore then and there, he would not succeed. The next day, investigators confirmed what I already knew. Accelerant traces, forced entry, arson. Patrice filed an emergency motion for protective relief, naming Marcus directly. "He'll deny it, of course," she said. "But the timing, the threats, the escalation, it's enough for the court to take notice. We'll push for sanctions, even criminal charges, if the sheriff does his job." But Maya wasn't content to wait on the law. She stood in the ruins of the studio, ash smudging her face, and declared, "We rebuild. Bigger. Stronger. We'll raise funds, rally volunteers, turn this into a symbol. If Marcus thought fire would scare us, he just gave us a torch." Her words lit something in me too. Ruth had always said, "Turn wounds into seeds." Maybe this fire wasn't just destruction. Maybe it was the start of something new. That night, I sat with the Hammond salvaged from the edge of the fire, its keys blackened but still playable. My fingers found a melody, slow, mournful at first, then rising, defiant. Maya joined in, humming harmony through her tears. And as the music filled the night, I felt Ruth's presence stronger than ever. Not in the ashes, not in the battles, but in the sound of our resilience. Marcus thought he had broken us, but all he had done was sharpen our resolve. The war for Magnolia Crest wasn't over, but the tide was turning. The ruins of the studio still smoldered in my mind long after the ashes cooled. But if Marcus thought he'd silenced us, he miscalculated. The fire had burned the wood and canvas, yes, but it had also lit a fire in the people. Within 3 days, dozens of volunteers showed up at Magnolia Crest. Neighbors brought lumber. Former students of Ruth arrived with brushes and buckets. Even the pastor from New Hope Baptist organized a prayer circle on the lawn, his booming voice declaring, "The enemy may bring flames, but we bring water, we bring song, we bring God's breath to rebuild." Maya coordinated with Patrice to launch a fundraising campaign. The first donation came from Isaiah, quiet but steady, sliding a check across the table with trembling hands. "I owe Ruth that much," he said. "And you." For the first time, I saw him as something more than Marcus's shadow. Maybe Ruth had been right. Isaiah still had a choice. Meanwhile, Patrice moved like a general preparing for battle. The files Isaiah had handed us, the bank records, the contracts, the payoffs, were pure dynamite. She sent copies to the county prosecutor, who opened an inquiry into Marcus. She sent others to Summit Resort's board of directors, and she held back the most damning documents, keeping them ready like an ace in her sleeve. At first, Marcus responded with bluster. His lawyers filed motions calling us desperate and delusional. His allies in the press churned out op-eds about greedy heirs blocking progress. But then the first leak hit the papers, evidence that Marcus had taken kickbacks to fast-track Summit's permits. The headlines screamed. The county courthouse buzzed. For once, Marcus Sterling wasn't the predator. He was the prey. 2 nights later, Isaiah came again, this time without the briefcase. He stood on the porch, hat in hand, eyes weary. "Marcus is unraveling," he said. "He's lashing out, saying he'll take everyone down with him. Elijah's already distanced himself. He doesn't want his name dragged through the mud. But Marcus, he's not letting go." I narrowed my eyes. "And you? Where do you stand, Isaiah?" He looked down at the porch boards. "I stand here. With you. For Ruth. For what's left of my soul." I studied him, hearing Ruth's voice in the back of my mind. "People can change, Zeke. Sometimes only when it's almost too late, but they can." "All right," I said finally. "Then help us finish this." The finishing came faster than I expected. On a gray Monday morning, Patrice called me. Her tone was sharp but triumphant. "We've got them. Summit's board voted last night to suspend all negotiations with Marcus. They're sending their own representatives to Magnolia Crest, directly to you." I nearly dropped the phone. "To me? To you? They want to salvage their project, and they know you control the Keystone property. They also know Ruth's name carries weight. They want a deal, and they'll bend to your conditions." I sat in silence, heart pounding. For months, it had been defense, resistance, surviving blow after blow. Now the tide had shifted. Now they were coming to me. That afternoon, 3 black SUVs rolled up the drive. Out stepped not Marcus, not his lawyers, but Summit CEO, Mr. Alston, flanked by 2 board members and a legal team that looked more nervous than intimidating. We met in the great room, under the half-charred beams that still smelled faintly of smoke. Maya stood at my side, her chin lifted, her mother's fire in her eyes. Isaiah sat quietly near the window, a silent witness. Mr. Alston adjusted his tie. "Mr. Johnson, first let me say how deeply we regret the recent attacks on your property. Summit condemns any illegal actions, and we will cooperate fully with the authorities in their investigation." His words were polished, rehearsed, but his eyes betrayed urgency. They needed this land. I folded my hands. Regret don't rebuild my wife's studio. Regret don't bring back the orchids my daughter planted. You want to talk business, talk plain. He nodded slowly. "Very well. We are prepared to offer you a package. Full preservation of the conservatory, a cultural center in Ruth Johnson's name funded entirely by Summit, and a long-term revenue share for your family from the resort's profits. In exchange, Summit secures the development rights to the outer acreage of Magnolia Crest." The room fell silent. Maya looked at me, eyes wide. It was more than money. It was a promise of legacy, a seat at the table. But Ruth's voice echoed in me. "Never sell the heart of a thing, Zeke. Protect the roots, or the branches won't matter." I leaned forward. The conservatory, the studio, the memorial center, they're non-negotiable. But there's more. You will designate the Western Acres as protected wetlands. No golf course, no condos. This land needs breath, not concrete. One of the board members frowned. That reduces our projected revenue substantially. Then you'll have to bend your projections, I said calmly, or you'll walk away with nothing. Maya squeezed my hand under the table. Isaiah cleared his throat. He's right. You push too far, and you'll lose everything. My brother thought he could bully his way here, but look where it got him. If you want to survive, deal with the man who actually holds the deed. Alston studied me for a long moment. Finally, he extended his hand. Agreed. That night, after they left, Maya and I sat on the porch, watching the fireflies spark over the lawn. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Daddy," she whispered, "Mama would be proud." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat thick as stone. She'd be proud of you, baby. You carried her fire when I was ready to let it burn out. We sat in silence, the weight of the day pressing down, but softened by relief. For the first time since Ruth's death, I felt the ground under me steady. But not all was steady. 2 days later, news broke. Marcus had been arrested. Fraud, conspiracy, bribery, the works. His face was splashed across every paper. The mighty Sterling brought low. Elijah issued a statement claiming ignorance. Isaiah, surprisingly, issued none at all. When the sheriff called to confirm, I felt no triumph, just a hollow ache. Marcus had chosen destruction, and now he'd pay the price. That evening, Isaiah returned one last time. His hand shook as he held out a small wooden box. "This belonged to David," he said quietly. "Our father gave it to him. Then I took it after David died. But it never sat right with me. It should be yours." I opened the box. Inside lay a pocket knife, worn smooth with years of use, and a folded scrap of paper. On it, in David's handwriting, were the words, "Protect what matters, no matter the cost." I closed the box gently. For the first time, Isaiah looked lighter, as though laying down a weight he'd carried too long. "Thank you," I said simply. He nodded. "Take care of Magnolia Crest. For Ruth. For all of us who couldn't." Then he turned and walked into the night. As the moon rose over the lake, I felt the story nearing its final note. Marcus was finished, Summit had bent, and Magnolia Crest stood, scarred but unbroken. But there was still one thing left to do. Ruth's final video awaited me on the laptop. The last word she had left, the last gift. I hadn't been ready before. Now, after fire and fight and victory, Tomorrow, I would press play. And whatever Ruth had saved for the end, I would carry it into the future. The laptop sat on the mahogany desk in Ruth's study, waiting. For weeks, I had watched her videos in order, each one pulling me through grief, through anger, through discovery. But this file was different. It was the last one, titled simply, "When You Are Ready." That morning, the house was quiet. Maya had gone to the city for a conference with the Preservation Council. Isaiah hadn't returned since that final night, and the workers rebuilding the studio had yet to arrive. For the first time in months, Magnolia Crest belonged only to me. I placed my hands on the keyboard, hesitated, then pressed play. The screen flickered, and there she was, Ruth, sitting in this same room, sunlight haloing her braids, eyes lit with a softness I hadn't seen since before the sickness took her. "Zeke," she said, her voice warm and steady. "If you're watching this, it means you've made it through the storm. I knew you would. You always had more strength than you gave yourself credit for." My throat tightened. I wanted to speak back, to tell her about the fires, the fights, the betrayals, but I just sat still, letting her voice fill the room. She continued, "I couldn't tell you everything while I was alive. My body was weak, but my heart, my heart had plans. I wanted to leave you more than grief. I wanted to leave you tools, memories, a path. Zeke, you and I both know land is more than dirt. It carries the stories of those who tend it, those who love it. That's why I fought so hard for Magnolia Crest." Her eyes glistened, but her smile didn't falter. "You probably faced my brothers by now. Maybe they tried to charm, maybe they tried to destroy. I know Marcus's pride, Elijah's cunning, Isaiah's silence. I know what men like them are capable of, but I also know what you're capable of. You have the one thing they never understood: love without greed. I leaned back, tears blurring my vision. She had known exactly what would unfold. Maybe not the details, but the shape of it. She always saw further than I did. Ruth shifted in her chair. Now listen carefully, because this is the last piece. Everything I left for you, the conservatory, the studio, the archives, it wasn't just for remembrance. It was for creation. You see, legacy isn't about what we leave behind. It's about what continues. Zeke, you have to keep creating. In music, in community, in family. Don't stop because I'm gone. Start because I was here. Her words struck me like a chord resolving after long dissonance. She leaned closer to the camera. And one more thing. Don't walk this path alone. Maya needs you, but you need her too. She carries my fire and your steadiness. Trust her, even when she doubts herself. Trust her to build what we dream together. Promise me you'll let her lead when her time comes. I whispered, I promise, though she couldn't hear. The video neared its end. Ruth clasped her hands in her lap, eyes shining. My love, if grief ever feels heavier than joy, step outside. Touch the soil, breathe the lake air, listen for the wind through the magnolias. I'll be there, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as part of the living world you and I tended together. And when your time comes, many years from now, I'll be waiting. Until then, live, Zeke. Live for me, for Maya, for you. She smiled one last time, a smile I carried in my bones. Goodbye, my love. Until someday. The screen went dark. I sat there for a long time, the silence loud as thunder. Then I stood, walked to the window, and looked out across the land. The morning light touched the magnolias, the charred studio beams being rebuilt, the conservatory glass, glinting like hope itself. For the first time since Ruth's death, I didn't feel like I was walking through ruins. I felt like I was standing at a beginning. Over the weeks that followed, Magnolia Crest transformed. Volunteers poured back in to help rebuild the studio, this time larger, with space not only for art but for music lessons, community workshops, and local exhibits. Maya spearheaded the foundation, securing grants, rallying donors, bringing Ruth's dream to life in ways I never imagined. I taught the neighborhood kids how to play simple blues riffs on the Hammond, their laughter ringing where grief once echoed. The conservatory reopened, filled with orchids that Ms. Jackson and Maya tended with reverence. Tourists began arriving, not just for the flowers, but for the story. Ruth's story, our story, etched into every wall. Summit Resorts signed the agreement, and for the first time, their representatives honored it. The wetlands were preserved, the land respected. For once, money bowed to memory. But the greatest change was inside me. One evening, months later, Maya called me into the studio. A large canvas stood on the easel. She had painted it herself, a sprawling piece filled with layers. The lake shimmering at dusk, magnolia blossoms floating like stars, and in the center, 3 figures. A woman with a crown of braids, a man at the Hammond, and a young woman holding both their hands. It's us, she said softly. The past, the present, the future. I couldn't speak. I just pulled her into my arms and held on. Marcus's trial dragged on in the background. His empire collapsed, his name stained, his freedom hanging by a thread. I thought I might feel vindicated, but mostly, I felt pity. He had all the power, all the money, yet he never understood what Ruth gave me. Love strong enough to survive loss. Isaiah visited once more, thinner, quieter, but more at peace. He walked through the conservatory, touching the orchids gently. She was right, he whispered. Beauty is the only inheritance worth fighting for. Then he left, fading from my life like a man who had finally found his rest. On the anniversary of Ruth's death, we held a gathering at Magnolia Crest. Not a funeral, not a memorial, something different. A celebration. The choir from New Hope sang. Children danced in the garden. Elders told stories on the porch. At sunset, Maya and I unveiled Ruth's portrait in the new cultural center. Her smile radiant, her eyes alive, painted from memory and love. As the crowd hushed, I sat at the Hammond, fingers trembling. Then I played the song Ruth had always called our hymn, slow blues rising into something brighter, almost gospel. Maya's voice joined mine, strong and sure, and together we filled the night with music. When the last note faded, I felt it, not grief, not emptiness, but presence. Ruth wasn't gone. She was in the orchids, in the paintings, in the music, in Maya's laughter, in me. Later that night, after the guests left and the candles burned low, I walked alone to the lake. The water was still, the moon mirrored on its surface. I whispered into the night, "I lived, Ruth, just like you asked, and I'll keep living." The wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of magnolia blossoms. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, and smiled. Magnolia Crest was no longer a battlefield. It was home, a place of roots and wings, of memory and future, a place where love had outlasted fire, greed, and even death. And as long as I drew breath, I would protect it, not out of duty, out of love, always out of love.